Hello, today I'm going to tell you about my remediation plan and basically what I ended up doing with my case study student Henry. So, for his present levels of performance, I determined that while he's at an appropriate level for like phonics and phonemic awareness, comprehension was a big struggle. More specifically, like main idea and details. So, I said that the student can attempt at decoding words above 2 syllables, decode text with high accuracy, demonstrate adequate fluency, or use good phonics and phonemic awareness. And I said the student can't determine like the main idea of a passage, focus on one detail about a text, or think of multiple contexts for vocabulary. I wanted to focus my remediation lessons on main idea and detail. What I initially wanted to do was to target all 3 of my lessons first on main idea, second on detail, and third on putting it all together, basically, as you can see in my case study 3. And the learning goals and outcomes I had is on my 1 lesson plan, the student will be able to identify the main idea of 5 example articles with 100% accuracy. The student will be able to identify the detail that doesn't match with the others 5 times with 100% accuracy, and using evidence from the text, Henry will be able to determine the main idea and details with 100% accuracy. But I didn't end up using the last one because the student didn't meet the first learning target. For my remediation activities, I planned them basically on a weekly basis. So week 1, I planned my first remediation lesson before Thursday and teach it on Thursday. For my second lesson, I planned it week 2 and then taught before Thursday, and then I taught it on Thursday, so on and so forth. So my first lesson was like writing the main idea, and I made a worksheet for it because there was no like online worksheet that automatically met what I wanted to do for this lesson. I actually made a worksheet myself via Google Drive. I tend to do that a lot when I create worksheets for lessons. So I basically just used article titles from ReadWorks website. I didn't actually go into the articles because it required me having to prove that I was an actual teacher. And I had the student determine the main idea by looking at the title alone, which was a strategy that was given to me in a discussion. I basically modeled the first question first, and I walked through what I wanted him to do. Then after that, I had him write down what he thought the article was going to be about based on that title and how he knew. Basically his reasoning, and it repeated for about as many questions as he could do. My lesson 2, since he didn't meet that first learning target, I decided to change it up a little bit and make it multiple choice. I figured it was basically the format of the worksheet that confused him and dragged him down, so I made it with multiple choice questions. I pulled titles from articles, partially from ReadWorks and partially from my own imagination, basically what was on my mind at the time. And I gave him like 3 potential options, and I circled the correct answer. I modeled the first question with him, and if he got the answer incorrect after, I basically just walked him through the correct answer. And the lesson 3 that I had was the details worksheet. So basically, I used the same strategy that was discussed in class, where I wrote a short paragraph and I stuck in one detail that didn't belong. For my first 2 modeling ones, I made it obvious for him. But for my other ones, I tried to make it less obvious. I modeled with the first two practice questions, and I worked with him to determine the relevant detail. I initially had him try to find the main idea too, as sort of like making it up for the previous lesson, like putting it all together, but then I figured that was dragging him down, so I had him stop. And also I had him come up with like a fake title for the article. So fundamentally, this lesson focused more on detail than main idea, and that was ultimately what was best for the student. So for my student's reaction, he wasn't really that thrilled to do remediation lessons with me. It's pretty expected for a middle schooler having to do like one-on-one work, because they're at that age where they really care about what their peers think, and it doesn't really look good to have them be pulled aside every time by not even a full teacher, but a college student. But despite this, I would try to make him feel comfortable with me, sort of just treat it as just another lesson. I would also joke with him a bit when appropriate, and I deliberately tailor some questions to his interests. Like, for instance, in the detail worksheet, he told me that I liked the I Survive series, so I did a little bit of background research beforehand about the series. And basically, from my personal experience, I found that middle schoolers tend to care about stuff more when you cater it to their interests, so it'd be an easier way to get him to follow along. Even though he wasn't thrilled, he was willing to get down to business to just complete this lesson. And also, he would still actively try even when he had a difficult time with it. I would still have to guide him along frequently, but the biggest part of it is that he actively tried. And for feedback, I would try to stay positive, and I would stay engaged with him throughout the whole time. I didn't just give him the silent treatment when he did independent work. And with each question, I would basically start my sentence. So, what do you think this is? And basically just try to have him think critically. When he got a question right, I would be like, that's right, how do you know? And then if he didn't know how, then I would just carefully explain to him. However, if he got a question wrong, I would, instead of telling him the right answer, I had him go in and try it again. Like, for instance, during the main idea multiple choice worksheet, I had him read the title of an article about platypuses that I made up. And by the title, he finally realized the correct answer. So I would consider his progress slow but steady. With the first worksheet, he did struggle quite a bit, and he wasn't able to meet my learning target. I took it as both his lack of comprehension skills and me making this worksheet too complicated for him, so I sort of adjusted it into a multiple choice. And when I did, I noticed that he had a much easier time trying to get through the questions. He did get one question wrong, but I had him look back at it, and he was able to figure out the mistake when I had him read the title, when I read the title to him again. And during the third lesson, he was able to meet the learning target, but his titles were not entirely varied, but he was still able to read the learning target even when he found the main idea. And he was able to, and basically everything I had him work on in the worksheet was basically just extra activities. So overall, I would say that things went well. While he didn't make perfect progress, that was expected given the fact that I was only with him once a week for only 3 Thursdays.